My wife confessed to her affair with her coach while she was sleep-talking. The next morning, I said, "You had an interesting dream. It sounded expensive." She laughed. Then she got an email from my lawyer with the highlighted credit card statement. The subject, divorce expenses. Her dream had become her own nightmare. "Man, you're not going to believe where I got the evidence." It wasn't a text message. It wasn't a hidden email. It was her own voice while she was dead asleep next to me. "I am Jason Thomas, 42 years old, and my day job is IT auditor and forensic analyst in Miami. My whole career is about finding the one line of bad data that sinks the entire system. I married Lila 10 years ago. She was 40, a corporate wellness consultant who radiated success and health. She pushed me to be better, eat cleaner, look sharper, and I loved her for it. But over the last 2 years, her focus shifted completely to her personal development. She hired a life coach, Mark, who quickly became her personal trainer, her confidant, and, as I was about to find out, her priority. I noticed the small things that any husband misses initially. The sudden, aggressive secrecy of her phone. The trips she took to conferences that mysteriously extended through the weekends. The subtle decline in her physical affection toward me. I told myself I was being paranoid. My job poisons your outlook. You start seeing conspiracies everywhere. I suppressed the doubts. I chose to trust her. The confrontation came, not when I was awake, but at 3 a.m. I woke up to the sound of her voice, soft, intimate, whispering into the darkness. She wasn't talking to me. She was talking about the retreat in Tulum. She was talking about a fight with her coach's wife. She was talking about Mark. I couldn't believe it. I slipped out of bed and went to my home office. I didn't try to confront her. I went straight to the data. I realized I couldn't fight this betrayal with emotion. I had to audit the marriage, a forensic audit of trust, and calculate the exact financial cost of her affair. I needed to see if the money she spent on her wellness was actually the money she spent on the affair. That realization, that I could use my professional skills to expose the truth, was the only thing that kept me sane that night. Man, I'm telling you, I didn't plan to record my own wife. That night, I woke up around 3 in the morning, the classic time for anxiety, and she was talking. At first, I thought she was having a bad dream, but then I realized her voice was soft, intimate, whispering details into the darkness next to me. It wasn't gibberish. She was listing places. She was naming people. I heard her mention Tulum. I heard her mention Mark. I heard her talking about his wife and how Mark had almost been caught. My training took over. I'm an IT auditor. When a system is compromised, you don't scream, you document. I slipped out of bed, moving slowly and deliberately, my heart hammering in my ribs. I went straight to my study, grabbed the small, sensitive field recorder I use for environmental audio analysis, and quietly placed it on the bedside table. The red light was almost invisible in the dark. It felt invasive, wrong, but the truth I was hearing felt far more destructive than my moral dilemma. I listened as the recorder captured the full confession. She detailed the secret weekend trips. She spoke about fights they had over money and time. She referred to Mark's stupid financial debt, and how I, her husband, would never suspect anything because I was too predictable. The most damning line wasn't the affair itself. It was when she whispered that she had told Mark she was worried about money, and he said, "Don't worry. Jason is funding my coaching business anyway." I retrieved the recorder, shut it off, and sat in the kitchen. The reality of the betrayal hitting me like a physical blow. It wasn't just infidelity. It was calculated financial espionage built on my trust. She wasn't looking for a fling. She was looking for a funding mechanism to support her affair partner. I went straight to the data. I couldn't sleep. I spent the rest of the night cross-referencing keywords from the recording, Mark, Tulum, the expensive gym, with our credit card statements. The numbers were brutal. Large, unexplained charges to boutique hotels in South Beach. A massive recurring payment to a private coaching service I knew nothing about. A flight booked to Mexico under a name that wasn't mine. I realized that every dollar I had spent on her corporate wellness was actually financing her affair. The evidence was now scientific, documented, and irrefutable. The moment I confirmed the hidden expenses, my rage finally solidified into a cold, operational calm. I deleted the audio file from my computer. I didn't need it for court. I only needed the evidence it led me to. The hard financial truth. Man, I spent the rest of that night in my home office. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a forensic analyst with a target. My anger wasn't loud. It was methodical. The kind of focus you get when you're hunting for a single line of bad code that could crash a system. I pulled up 3 years of joint credit card statements, filtering for anything related to wellness, travel, or Mark's known business location. The first thing that jumped out wasn't a hotel. It was a sudden, massive increase in the fees paid to the Elite Performance Coaching Center. The monthly charge had quietly tripled 6 months prior. It wasn't just for classes. It was the fee for Mark's private, high-end coaching tier. A fee I had previously questioned, and Lila had dismissed as a necessary professional development expense. Then the travel charges started to appear. I cross-referenced the dates Lila claimed she was at corporate training conferences with expenses billed to high-end, boutique hotels. The addresses didn't match the conference locations. They matched the locations Mark often posted about on his private social media feed. The affair had a clear price tag: $15,000 over 6 months, minimum. This wasn't cheap spontaneity. This was a well-financed, ongoing operation built on my predictable income. The most infuriating part was how the charges were disguised. She paid for the private sessions with Mark using a shell account linked to a corporate retreat expense code. She was applying her skills as a corporate consultant to finance her own infidelity, and I, the auditor, had missed it completely. I remembered her whispering about Tulum in her sleep. I found the charges. 2 first-class tickets booked through a small travel agency I had never used. The dates were precisely when she told me she was visiting her sister in Orlando. I sat back in my chair, the light of the monitor reflecting the harsh reality on my face. It wasn't just infidelity. It was financial misrepresentation, sustained fraud, and profound disrespect for the very concept of partnership. I realized I didn't need the audio recording for court. The financial records, the digital fingerprints she left, were a much cleaner, more damning testimony. The money she claimed she needed for health was the exact cost of destroying our marriage. I worked until dawn, compiling the evidence into a single, comprehensive PDF document. I highlighted every flight, every hotel stay, every tripled coaching fee. It was a map of her betrayal, drawn in red ink. I now had the facts to end the marriage without emotion, and I had the proof to ensure she would never see another cent of my hard-earned money. The final piece of the puzzle was letting her think she was still in control. I went to the bedroom and slipped into bed. I lay next to the woman who had just financed her affair with my credit line and waited for her to wake up. I knew the initial confrontation had to be psychological, the calm before the storm of financial reality. The morning broke, and I lay in bed next to my wife, listening to the subtle rhythm of her breathing. I had my proof, but I needed to see her perform one last time. I needed to give her the chance to admit the lie before the data destroyed her. Lila woke up, stretched, and gave me a casual kiss. The same kiss she probably gave Mark the morning after their weekend in Tulum. "Morning, sleepyhead," she murmured. I looked her dead in the eye and delivered the first line of the hook, keeping my voice soft, almost playful. "You had an interesting dream last night, Lila." It sounded expensive. She laughed instantly, that easy professional laugh she used to dismiss an awkward client pitch. "Did I? What was it about?" "Probably that insane Maldives package you were looking at." She didn't miss a beat. She lied easily, twisting the dream into something she knew I'd accept. But I pressed the point just slightly. "No, it sounded like Tulum, and maybe a little bit about a fitness coach." Her smile froze. For a millisecond, I saw the genuine panic. Then she recovered, her eyes hardening slightly, settling back into her default mode, defensive manipulation. "God, Jason, you're so weird when you wake up. You need to stop being so paranoid." "Mark? We worked out a conflict resolution plan yesterday. You're imagining things." She had been given the opening to confess, to use dream as her escape hatch. But she chose to double down on the lie and call me paranoid. That confirmed everything. I knew then that the audio file and the credit card statements were the only language she would ever understand. I got out of bed and went straight to the lawyer's phone number. I called Vivian Vance, the verdict, the lawyer I consulted during the sleepless night. "Vivian," I said, "I need you to schedule a joint meeting. I have the proof, and I want the divorce papers served immediately upon confrontation." I explained my strategy. The confrontation had to be neutral, professional ground, my lawyer's office, to prevent her from attempting a physical or emotional manipulation in our home. I wanted the setting to be as cold and surgical as the evidence itself. Next, I prepared the package. I spent the morning printing the financial audit, the $15,000 in disguised fees, the charges to the gym and the boutique hotels, all highlighted in neon yellow. I had the divorce petition printed out and signed. I created a specific email subject line for maximum impact: divorce expenses. The entire process was about turning my emotional pain into an unavoidable, logical, financial reality for her. Lila, meanwhile, was oblivious, thinking she had successfully dismissed my dream. She spent the afternoon shopping, using the credit cards she believed I was too docile to cancel. She had no idea that her interesting dream was about to become the most expensive piece of fiction in her entire life. I was ready for the final meeting. I didn't want the confrontation at home. I wanted the reality to hit her when she was surrounded by the image she worked so hard to protect. I tracked Lila's schedule. That morning, she was at a downtown meeting, giving a presentation to a major corporate client. A perfect audience for her immediate, catastrophic collapse. I drove to a cafe near the meeting site and waited for the prearranged time. At 11:30 a.m. sharp, I hit the button. The email went out from my lawyer's secure server. The recipients were Lila, her personal work email, and her manager, just to ensure accountability. The subject line was short, brutal, and impossible to ignore: divorce expenses. The email body contained two critical attachments. The first was the official divorce petition, signed and filed an hour earlier. The second was my forensic audit PDF, a document with every charge to the gym, every payment to Mark's coaching service, and the entire cost of the Tulum trip, highlighted in neon yellow. I knew the delivery was immediate. Simultaneously, I executed the second, equally important move. I logged into our primary joint checking account and transferred the remaining viable balance to my private account. I then hit the Report Stolen button on the 2 supplementary credit cards she carried. The financial lifeline she thought she possessed was severed in less than 60 seconds. I just sat there, waiting for the ripple effect. I knew that in that moment, in that high-powered boardroom, her phone had buzzed. My lawyer later told me what happened. Lila was midway through a confident presentation on corporate optimization when the email notification appeared. She glanced down, saw the subject line, and the word divorce. She immediately excused herself, pale, rushing out of the boardroom to check the document. The sight of the audit, the irrefutable proof that I had been tracking her affair expenses, triggered her total psychological breakdown. She didn't scream at me, she screamed at her phone. She tried calling me, but my number was already blocked. She called the bank, only to discover the accounts were frozen or empty. Her co-workers found her huddled in the hallway, mascara running, clutching the printout of the financial statement. She wasn't angry. She was utterly defeated. Her entire strategy of quiet deception and financial superiority was exposed not by a dramatic fight at home, but by a cold, calculated email. Her delusion that I was too predictable had just cost her every single thing she had invested in: her reputation, her career image, and her marriage. Man, I got the first report from my lawyer 2 hours after I hit send. Lila didn't go back to the presentation. She stayed in the hallway, screaming at her phone, trying to log into the accounts I had already secured. Her entire facade of success and control cracked wide open right there in front of her co-workers. The first person to abandon ship was predictably Mark. He wasn't fighting for love. He was fighting for his business model. I later saw a frantic text exchange between Mark and Lila, forwarded to me by my attorney's investigator. Mark told her the financial risk was too high. He was terrified that the fraud charges would contaminate his coaching firm. He cut her off immediately, refusing to answer her calls or take responsibility for the Tulum trip they financed with my money. Her soulmate vanished the moment the money stopped flowing. Lila went through every stage of grief in the wrong order. First, pure, toxic rage. She sent me a barrage of emails, not realizing they were all being logged by my lawyer's server. She accused me of blackmail, of financial terrorism, and of violating her privacy by tracking her charges. She used the exact language you hear in divorce cases, but her foundation was non-existent. I never responded. My silence was the brick wall she kept running into. Then the social isolation began. She tried calling her closest friends, the ones she used to network with at those corporate retreats. They had seen her meltdown in the hallway. They knew about Mark. One by one, they stopped answering. She had spent years cultivating status, and I destroyed it with a single PDF of cold, hard numbers. The most satisfying call came from her manager, who was bewildered by the situation. He called me directly, wanting to know why his corporate wellness consultant was under investigation for financial misconduct. "We need to know, Jason," her manager asked. "Did she use the company card for this Tulum trip?" "I don't know about her company card," I replied calmly. "I only know she used our joint credit line to finance her affair. The evidence is attached to the divorce filing." The manager didn't need any more information. Lila's career, which depended entirely on her image of stability and wellness, was over. She had successfully poisoned her own well. She showed up at the condo once, unannounced. I watched her on the security feed, fumbling with her key, which I had already deactivated. She stood there, defeated, and eventually walked away, leaving a short, pleading note on the welcome mat. She confessed she couldn't afford the rent, couldn't afford the lawyers, and couldn't understand why I was so cold. She didn't understand that the man she was facing wasn't her husband. It was the forensic analyst who had closed the case. The court proceedings were surprisingly quiet after the initial shock. Lila hired a new lawyer who immediately saw the irrefutable evidence of the fraud, the highly detailed receipts, and the email from her manager confirming her ethical lapse. She knew she couldn't fight the audit. The divorce was finalized within the month. She walked away with only the assets she brought into the marriage, and a massive debt for my attorney fees and the money she stole. I kept the condo and the security of my future. But the real victory wasn't the money. It was the psychological severance. I hadn't just divorced a wife. I had successfully closed a massive security breach. The chaos she craved had finally overwhelmed her. Mark, the affair partner, was long gone, terrified that her desperation would expose his own shaky finances. She was left completely isolated in a city that only respects winners. Her career as a corporate wellness consultant was over. The story of the auditor who exposed the fraud was a professional legend. The story of the consultant who financed her affair with her husband's money was professional death. She lost all her major contracts. I later learned she was forced to sell her car and moved out of Miami entirely, having burned through all her social capital. She went back to live with her parents, stripped of the status and pretense she had valued more than anything. I, on the other hand, was finally free to focus on my systems. The silence in the condo was profound. It was no longer the silence of suspicion, but the clean, steady quiet of a life operating efficiently. I sold the condo shortly after, needing a fresh start where no wall held the memory of a whispered lie. I bought a small house on the water, investing a significant portion of the recovered money into a financial literacy program for young couples, a quiet way to fight the kind of financial fraud I endured. My life had become simpler, cleaner, and absolutely honest. I hadn't just won a divorce, I had won the war for my own sanity. Sometimes I still think about that night, the sound of her voice in the dark, confessing her betrayal. I didn't lose my dignity in that marriage. I simply sacrificed my trust to gain irrefutable evidence, and the knowledge that I had called her bluff, that I had audited the expense of her affair and delivered the bill directly to her family, was the final, satisfying piece I needed. The man who once feared he was too predictable had proven that his logic was the ultimate weapon. Her dream of freedom had become her financial nightmare.